I am Marguerite, 58 years old, and for 3 decades, I believed my corporate career defined me. Then suddenly, it vanished. What happened next broke my heart into pieces. My own son, the boy I raised alone after his father left, showed me the door when he learned about my job loss. Little did he know that beneath my practical pantsuits and sensible sedan, I had quietly been building an empire. If you have ever been judged unfairly by family, hit subscribe and let me know where you are watching from. My story begins with a phone call that changed everything. I grew up in Traverse City, Michigan, a small town where everyone knew each other. My parents worked multiple jobs to keep food on our table. Dad was a factory worker who took weekend shifts at the gas station, while Mom cleaned houses and worked as a cashier at the local grocery store. They never had much, but they made sure I understood the value of education. Marguerite, my father would say, with his calloused hands on my shoulders, books are your way out. Study hard, and you will have opportunities we never did. I took those words to heart. Every evening after finishing my chores, I would sit at our kitchen table with textbooks spread out before me, determined to make my parents proud. Their sacrifice fueled my ambition. I graduated high school as valedictorian and became the first person in my family to attend college. College wasn't easy. I worked 20 hours a week at the campus library and another 15 at a coffee shop downtown. Sleep became a luxury I rarely afforded myself. But I persevered because quitting simply wasn't an option. It was during my senior year that I met Alan. He was studying business administration and had the kind of confidence that came from growing up with privilege. He noticed me in the library one evening, struggling to stay awake while studying for finals. "You look like you could use this more than me," he said, placing a cup of coffee on my table. His smile was warm, genuine. We started dating shortly after that. Alan was everything I wasn't. Carefree, spontaneous, from a wealthy family. Where I was practical and cautious, he was a risk-taker. Perhaps that's why we worked so well together initially. We balanced each other. After graduation, we married in a small ceremony. My parents scraped together enough money to buy me a simple white dress. Alan's parents paid for everything else. The disparity in our backgrounds was never more apparent than on our wedding day. 2 years later, our son Travis was born. I still remember holding him for the first time, making a silent promise to give him everything I never had. By then, I had secured an entry-level position at Meridian Financial Services. The pay wasn't great, but it offered stability and potential for growth. For the first few years, things were good. Alan worked at his father's real estate company, while I slowly climbed the corporate ladder. We bought a modest house in the suburbs and took turns caring for Travis. But as time passed, Alan grew restless. His entrepreneurial spirit clashed with the structured environment of his father's business. When Travis turned 8, Alan announced he wanted to start his own company. He used most of our savings to launch a tech startup without consulting me first. I was furious, but tried to be supportive. 6 months later, the business failed. Then came another venture and another failure. Each time, our financial security took a hit. By the time Travis was 12, the strain had become too much. Alan and I divorced. He moved to California to reinvent himself, leaving me to raise Travis alone. Child support checks came sporadically at first, then stopped altogether. I doubled down on my career, working longer hours to provide for my son. Promotions came along with raises and increasing responsibility. I moved up to manager, then director, and finally, senior vice president of operations at Meridian. The work was demanding, but I found satisfaction in my success. Meanwhile, I discovered something unexpected. I had a knack for investing. It started small, putting a few $100s into stocks recommended by colleagues. I read investment books during my lunch breaks and studied market trends in the evenings after Travis went to sleep. While my corporate salary paid for our daily needs, my investments became my secret passion. I never touched that money, instead, reinvesting dividends and gradually building a portfolio that outperformed even my most optimistic projections. Few people knew about this side of me. At work, I was just Marguerite, the operations executive, not Marguerite, the savvy investor. Travis grew up watching me live frugally. I drove the same car for 15 years. Our vacations were modest road trips rather than exotic getaways. When he complained about not having the latest gaming console or designer clothes that his friends had, I explained the importance of financial responsibility. "Money doesn't grow on trees, Travis," I would tell him. "We have what we need, and that's enough." As he entered his teenage years, Travis became increasingly embarrassed by my practical approach to money. He wanted more status, more luxury, more everything. The disconnect between us grew. When it came time for college, Travis chose an expensive private university. I dipped into my corporate savings to pay his tuition, never touching my investment portfolio. After graduation, Travis followed in his father's footsteps and went into real estate. Unlike Alan, he proved to have genuine talent for the business. He quickly found success selling luxury properties in Boston, where we had moved for my job at Meridian's headquarters. Travis met Stephanie during his second year as a realtor. She came from old money. Her family owned half the commercial properties downtown. They married after dating for just 8 months. I tried to connect with Stephanie, but she always maintained a polite distance. To her, I was just Travis's middle-class mother who worked too much. My relationship with Travis became increasingly strained after his marriage. Our Sunday dinners became monthly, then quarterly. When we did meet, conversations revolved around his latest sales achievements or Stephanie's social connections. I would listen, smile, and keep my thoughts to myself. "Mom, you should treat yourself more," Travis would say, eyeing my sensible shoes and department store clothes. "You work so hard. Why not enjoy some luxury?" Little did he know that my investment portfolio had grown to 7 figures. I had more than enough to buy designer everything if I wanted to. But that wasn't who I was. The wealth I was building wasn't for showing off. It was for security, independence, and eventually for helping others. I saw no reason to correct his assumptions about my finances. What Travis never understood was that my frugality wasn't born of necessity, but choice. I remembered too clearly what it felt like to grow up with nothing. That fear never entirely leaves you. Besides, I took pride in my practical nature. It had served me well for 58 years. Why change now? And then came the day that would test everything I thought I knew about my life, my career, and my relationship with my son. The morning started like any other. I arrived at the office at 7:30, coffee in hand, ready to tackle the day's challenges. My assistant Judy gave me my usual rundown of meetings and deadlines. Everything seemed normal until my phone rang at 9:15. "Marguerite, can you come to the conference room?" It was Richard, the CEO, his voice uncharacteristically formal. I grabbed my tablet and headed to the meeting mentally, reviewing our current projects. Had something gone wrong with the new system implementation? Was there an issue with the quarterly numbers? When I entered the room, my heart sank. Richard was there along with Patricia from HR and 2 executives I recognized from the parent company that had acquired Meridian 3 years ago. Their expressions told me everything I needed to know. "Please have a seat," Patricia said, gesturing to an empty chair. For the next 20 minutes, I sat in stunned silence as they explained the Strategic Restructuring Initiative. After 32 years with the company, I was being let go. Words like redundancies, streamlining operations, and consolidation of leadership roles washed over me. "Your contributions have been invaluable," Richard said, not quite meeting my eyes. "But the board has decided to move in a different direction." Patricia slid a folder across the table. "This contains information about your severance package, 6 months' salary, extended health benefits, and outplacement services." I felt like I was floating outside my body, watching this happen to someone else. 32 years of dedication reduced to a folder of termination paperwork. When my voice sounded strange to my own ears. "Effective immediately," Patricia replied. "We'll have Judy pack up your personal items. Company policy, I'm afraid." Within an hour, I was sitting in my car in the parking garage, a cardboard box containing 3 decades of professional life on the passenger seat beside me. My phone began buzzing with messages from colleagues who had just heard the news. I turned it off. I couldn't deal with their sympathy, not yet. I drove home in a daze, the familiar route, passing in a blur of traffic lights and turn signals. Once inside my apartment, I dropped the box on the kitchen counter and poured myself a glass of wine. It was barely noon. "This is just a setback," I told myself firmly. "You have experience, connections. You'll find something else." The next morning, I created a schedule for myself. 8 to noon, update resume and LinkedIn profile. Noon to 1 lunch, 1 to 5 research companies, and reach out to contacts. It gave me purpose, structure. I threw myself into the job search with the same determination I had applied to my career. I reached out to former colleagues and industry contacts. I applied for dozens of positions at my level. I even hired a career coach to refine my interview skills. But as the weeks turned into months, the harsh reality set in. At 58, I was facing an uphill battle. Younger executives with current skill sets were snapping up the available positions. When I did get interviews, I could sense the unspoken concern. Was I too old? Too entrenched in traditional approaches? Too expensive? "We've decided to go in another direction," became a phrase I heard with disheartening regularity. By the 4-month mark, I started considering positions below my previous level. By month 5, I was applying for jobs I was wildly overqualified for. The rejections kept coming. Each morning, I checked my investment portfolio. The numbers were reassuring. I had enough to retire comfortably if I wanted to. But work had always been a core part of my identity. The thought of not having a professional purpose left me feeling adrift. I kept up appearances during this time. When friends or former colleagues asked how the job search was going, I'd smile and say, "I'm exploring my options." When Travis called rarely, I never mentioned losing my job. Pride perhaps kept me from admitting the truth. But as my severance period neared its end, anxiety began to creep in. It wasn't about money. My investments would more than sustain me. It was about facing a future I hadn't planned for. A future where I might no longer be Marguerite the executive. After 6 months of fruitless job hunting, I finally decided it was time to tell Travis. He should know that his mother was unemployed, even if temporary. Despite our strained relationship, he was still my son. Perhaps this vulnerability might even bring us closer. I called him on a Tuesday afternoon. "Mom, can I call you back later? I'm showing a property," he said, the sound of traffic in the background. "Actually, Travis, I was hoping we could have dinner this week. There's something I need to discuss with you. A pause. Is everything okay? Yes, just something I'd prefer to talk about in person. Another pause. Sure. How about Thursday? You can come over around 7. Stephanie's making her famous lasagna. I agreed, though the thought of having this conversation with Stephanie present made my stomach clench. But perhaps it would be better with her, there less chance of Travis making a scene. As I hung up, I tried to imagine how the conversation would go. Travis would be surprised, certainly, maybe concerned, but he was my son. Surely he would offer support, encouragement. Maybe even a temporary place to stay if I needed to downsize my apartment to stretch my savings. Little did I know how wrong I was. Travis and Stephanie's house always made me feel out of place. It was a sprawling colonial in Beacon Hill, with hand-painted wallpaper and furniture that looked too delicate to actually sit on. The kind of house that belonged in a magazine, not a home where people lived real lives. I arrived at 6:55, precisely, a bottle of moderately priced wine in hand. Stephanie opened the door, her blonde hair perfectly styled, despite the fact that she'd supposedly been cooking all afternoon. "Marguerite, welcome," she said, air-kissing both my cheeks. "Travis is in his office, finishing up a call. He will join us shortly." I followed her into the immaculate kitchen, where not a single ingredient appeared to be out of place. Stephanie poured me a glass of wine, not the one I brought, I noticed, and chatted about their recent trip to the Maldives. "The overwater bungalows are simply magical," she said, checking something in the oven that smelled divine. Though we had to switch rooms twice before finding one with the proper eastern exposure for sunrise yoga. I nodded politely, sipping my wine and trying to imagine having problems of that magnitude. Travis appeared 20 minutes later, still talking on his phone about a waterfront property listing. He waved at me, held up one finger, indicating he needed another minute, and continued his conversation. "Of course they need to come up another 100,000, he said to whoever was on the other end. "The comps clearly support it, and there's another buyer waiting in the wings." After he finally hung up, he came over and gave me a quick hug. "Sorry about that, Mom. Big sale about to close. How are you?" "I'm fine, thank you," I said, suddenly nervous about the conversation ahead. Dinner was served in their formal dining room, complete with candles and multiple courses. Stephanie talked about her charity committee work, while Travis shared stories about difficult clients. Neither asked about my work or life. It wasn't until dessert, a delicate panna cotta that Stephanie proudly announced contained barely any calories, that I found an opening. "Actually, I wanted to talk to you both about something important," I said, setting down my spoon. They both looked up Stephanie with mild curiosity, Travis with impatience. "The thing is," I began, "I'm no longer with Meridian Financial." Travis blinked. "You changed companies? That's surprising after all these years." "No," I clarified. "I was let go. The company restructured and eliminated my position. It happened 6 months ago." The silence that followed was deafening. Stephanie's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose nearly to her hairline. Travis set down his water glass with deliberate care. 6 months, he finally said. "You've been unemployed for 6 months and didn't tell me." I explained about the severance package, the job search, my hopes for finding a new position. "At your age," Stephanie interjected, then had the grace to look embarrassed. "I mean, isn't it difficult to start over in a new company after so long?" "It has been challenging," I admitted, "which is why I'm considering downsizing. My apartment lease is up next month, and I'm looking at more affordable options." Travis leaned back in his chair, studying me, with an expression I couldn't quite read. "I don't understand," he said slowly. You were at Meridian for what, 30 years? Senior VP position. Didn't you save anything, invest? His tone made my cheeks burn. Of course I saved, I replied. But I also put you through college and graduate school. That wasn't inexpensive. That was your choice, he said dismissively. And it was years ago. What have you been doing with your money since then? All those years of six-figure salary. Before I could respond, Stephanie jumped in. You know, my Aunt Vivian faced a similar situation last year. She moved into a darling little apartment complex for seniors, very affordable, and they organized bingo nights. I stared at her, momentarily speechless. I wasn't even 60 yet, and she was suggesting senior living. I appreciate the thought, Stephanie, but I'm not ready for a retirement community. Travis sighed, the sound heavy with disappointment. Mom, this is exactly the problem. You're not being realistic about your situation. You need to drastically downsize your lifestyle. I'm aware of that, Travis. That's why I'm telling you. We have the pool house, he interrupted, glancing at Stephanie, who gave a tight smile. You could stay there temporarily while you figure things out. It has its own entrance kitchenette. We wouldn't be in each other's way. The offer should have sounded generous. Instead, it felt like charity delivered with a condescension that stung. Thank you, but I'm not sure that's necessary, I said carefully. Travis leaned forward, his expression hardening. Mom, be practical. You're unemployed with no prospects. Your retirement fund probably took a hit when the market dropped last year. You need to accept help. Actually, my investments have performed quite. This is what I'm talking about. He cut me off again. You're not facing reality. Do you know how many of my clients are in your exact position? Career professionals who thought they were set for life, then got blindsided without adequate preparation. Each word felt like a slap. This was my son, the boy I had raised alone, taught to ride a bike, helped with homework, supported through every challenge. Now he was lecturing me about financial planning. If you'd taken my advice years ago and invested in property, instead of keeping your money in whatever savings account is paying you 1% interest, you wouldn't be in this position, he continued. I told you, real estate was the way to build actual wealth. Stephanie nodded sagely beside him. It's how we've built our portfolio. Property never loses value, not really. I thought about the 2008 housing crash, but held my tongue. Look, Travis said, his tone softening into something that was somehow worse pity. The pool house is yours if you want it, but there would need to be some ground rules. We entertain often, so you'd need to be discreet about coming and going, and we'd need you to contribute to utilities, say $300 a month. I sat there, the beautiful dining room suddenly feeling airless. My own son was offering me his pool house, like I was a charity case with conditions attached. The humiliation was complete when he added, "And Mom, it might be time to trade in your car for something more economical. That Volvo may be reliable, but the gas mileage is terrible. You need to cut every expense now." Something inside me snapped. I stood up, napkin falling to the floor. I appreciate your concern, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. But I'll manage on my own. Travis looked genuinely confused. Mom, don't be proud. This is a serious situation. You need help. What I need, I replied, gathering my purse, is respect. Thank you for dinner, Stephanie. The lasagna was lovely. I walked out of their dining room, through their perfect foyer, and out the front door. Behind me, I heard Travis call my name, but I didn't turn around. My hands were shaking as I got into my apparently too expensive Volvo and drove away. The tears came as soon as I pulled out of their driveway. I made it 2 blocks before I had to pull over my vision. too blurred to continue. Parked under a streetlight, I finally let go of the composure I'd maintained throughout dinner. I cried for the loss of my career, for the son who saw me as nothing more than a financial failure, for the years I'd spent trying to be both mother and father to a child who now viewed me with disdain. 30 minutes passed as I sat there, tissues from my glove compartment piling up beside me. When the tears finally subsided, exhaustion took their place. It was nearly 11, and I couldn't face the drive back to my apartment. I checked my phone and found 3 missed calls from Travis. No voicemails. A text message appeared. "Mom, you're being irrational. Come back and we can discuss this calmly." I didn't reply. Instead, I searched for nearby hotels and found a Holiday Inn 10 minutes away. It wasn't luxury, but it was clean and anonymous, exactly what I needed. The night clerk barely looked up as I checked in, for which I was grateful. My eyes were puffy, my makeup long since cried away. In the sterile quiet of room 214, I sat on the edge of the bed and tried to make sense of the evening. Had I misread my son so completely? Was the caring boy I raised truly gone, replaced by this materialistic stranger who measured worth by income and property values? Or had he always been this way, and I simply hadn't wanted to see it? My phone buzzed again around midnight. Another text from Travis. "I've put together some listings for affordable apartments in Somerville and Medford. The rental market is competitive, so you should act quickly. Let me know if you need me to co-sign." The message was the final straw, practical assistance offered without a shred of emotional support. As if my primary concern should be real estate rather than the fact that my own son had just treated me like a burden. Sleep evaded me that night. I lay awake watching shadows move across the ceiling, replaying the dinner conversation, and wondering where I had gone wrong. Had I taught Travis to value money over compassion? Had my focus on career success sent the wrong message? Morning came with no answers, just a headache and gritty eyes. I showered, put on yesterday's clothes, and checked out of the hotel. With no particular destination in mind, I drove aimlessly until I found myself outside Dorothy's house in Cambridge. Dorothy had been my friend since Travis was in elementary school. Our sons had played soccer together, and we'd bonded over sideline conversations about single parenthood. Unlike most of my other friendships, this one had survived job changes, moves, and the passage of time. I sat in my car, debating whether to bother her so early on a Friday morning. Before I could decide, the front door opened, and Dorothy emerged in a bathrobe, newspaper in hand. She spotted my car and waved, then did a double take upon seeing my face. Moments later, I was sitting at her kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee, as I told her everything. "That little snot," Dorothy said when I finished recounting Travis's reaction. "After everything you've done for him." "I keep wondering if I did something wrong," I admitted. "Maybe I emphasized career success too much." Dorothy shook her head firmly. "No, Marguerite. You showed him the value of hard work and independence. You put him through college without help from his father. If he can't appreciate that the failure is his, not yours." I nearly told her then about my investments, about the fact that I wasn't actually in financial trouble. But some instinct held me back. I needed someone to see the situation clearly, without the complication of my secret wealth. "You can stay here as long as you need," Dorothy offered. "The guest room is small, but it's yours." I thanked her, but explained I needed to figure things out on my own. The first step was meeting with my financial advisor, Jeremy, whom I'd scheduled to see that afternoon. Jeremy's office was on the 32nd floor of a downtown high-rise with views of Boston Harbor. We'd been working together for 15 years, ever since I'd accumulated enough investments to warrant professional management. "Marguerite," he greeted me warmly, rising from behind his desk. "It's been a while. How are you holding up since leaving Meridian?" Jeremy was one of the few people who knew the full extent of my financial situation. There was no need for pretense. "Actually, that's why I'm here," I replied after we'd exchanged pleasantries. "I need to get a clear picture of where I stand financially." For the next hour, Jeremy walked me through my portfolio, diversified investments across domestic and international markets, a substantial holding in blue-chip stocks, bonds, and some carefully selected real estate investment trusts. Years of disciplined saving and strategic investing had created a substantial nest egg. "Bottom line, Marguerite," Jeremy said, turning his computer screen so I could see the numbers. "Your current net worth stands at approximately $4.2 million. Even with conservative withdrawal rates, you could maintain your current lifestyle indefinitely without ever working again." The figure shouldn't have surprised me. I reviewed my statements monthly, but seeing it laid out so plainly brought a strange mixture of relief and vindication. And if I wanted to make some changes, perhaps buy property instead of renting, Jeremy nodded approvingly. "You're in an excellent position to do that. In fact, I've been suggesting you consider real estate as a tangible asset for years." "Yes, well," I smiled wryly. "Sometimes we need a push to make changes." As I left Jeremy's office, a plan began forming in my mind. Travis thought I was a financial failure, someone to be pitied and housed in his pool house. What would happen if he discovered the truth? Not just that I wasn't destitute, but that I had substantially more wealth than he likely did, despite his luxury lifestyle. The petty part of me wanted to simply show up at his door with my portfolio statements. But as satisfying as that might be, momentarily, it wouldn't address the real issue. My son's values had become warped by materialism and status-seeking. No, this required a more thoughtful approach, one that might actually teach him something about what really matters in life. Over the next 2 weeks, I executed my plan with the same precision I had once applied to corporate projects. I stayed with Dorothy temporarily, despite her insistence that I could remain as long as needed. Her generosity only reinforced my determination to handle the situation with Travis properly. My first order of business was finding a new home, not just any apartment, but a place that would serve as both statement and sanctuary. I worked with Elaine, a realtor from Dorothy's book club, who understood exactly what I was looking for after I explained the situation. "So we need something impressive enough to make your son's jaw drop, but not ostentatious," she summarized during our first meeting. "Something that says successful and sophisticated, not desperate for approval." "Precisely," I confirmed. We toured properties throughout Boston's most desirable neighborhoods before finding the perfect match, a corner unit on the 11th floor of a luxury building in Back Bay. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the Charles River. The building had every amenity imaginable: concierge service, rooftop garden, private wine storage, and a fitness center with personal trainers on staff. "This is it," I said, standing in the empty living room, imagining Travis's face when he saw it. Elaine smiled knowingly. "Shall I prepare an offer?" I paid cash, closing in record time. The next challenge was furnishing the space in a way that conveyed quiet luxury without ostentation. I hired an interior designer recommended by Elaine and gave her a simple brief: create a home that reflected success achieved through intelligence and discipline, not flashy wealth. While my new home took shape, I was simultaneously working on another aspect of my plan. Through my network of financial contacts, I discovered something interesting. Travis had been trying to acquire a particular commercial property in downtown Boston for months. It was a historic building with potential for conversion to high-end retail and residential units, exactly the kind of project that would cement his reputation in luxury real estate. The owner is entertaining multiple offers, my contact informed me, but none have met his asking price yet. An idea formed, audacious, and perhaps a little petty, but potentially effective. I set up a meeting with the building's owner through an LLC I created specifically for this purpose. The name, Second Chances Properties, felt appropriately meaningful. The owner, Mr. Patterson, was an elderly gentleman whose family had held the building for generations. He was selling reluctantly, concerned about the property's future. "I don't want some developer gutting all the history," he explained, as we toured the ornate lobby with its original marble floors. This building was part of Boston's golden age. It deserves respect. I couldn't agree more, I assured him. My intention would be to restore, not replace. To honor what makes this building special while giving it new purpose. By the end of our meeting, I had made an offer slightly above asking price, with conditions that guaranteed preservation of key architectural elements. Mr. Patterson accepted on the spot. "I've had higher offers," he admitted, "but none with your appreciation for the building's soul." I didn't ask if one of those offers had been from Travis. I didn't need to. Meanwhile, Travis had been texting me regularly, his messages evolving from condescending to concerned as days passed without my response. "Mom, did you look at those apartment listings I sent? Mom, I'm worried about you. At least let me know where you're staying. Mom, this is ridiculous. Call me back." Finally, after 2 weeks of silence. "Mom, please. I'm sorry if I upset you. Let's talk." That last message arrived the day I moved into my new condominium. Standing amid elegant furniture and artwork that had been carefully selected to create an atmosphere of understated prosperity, I decided it was time to respond. "I'm fine, Travis. I found a new place. Would you and Stephanie like to come for dinner this Saturday?" I added my new address without further explanation. His response came within minutes. "That's in Back Bay. Are you house-sitting for someone?" The assumption was so predictable, I almost laughed. "No, I've moved here. Saturday at 7. The 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times before his confirmation came through. "We'll be there." With that settled, I focused on the final details. I spent a day with this personal chef who came with the condo building, planning a menu that would rival anything Stephanie might serve. I selected wines from the building's cellar, arranged fresh flowers for every room, and made sure everything was perfect. The night before their visit, I stood in my new living room, looking out at the twinkling lights of Boston spread below me. For the first time since losing my job, I felt a sense of peace. Whatever happened with Travis tomorrow, I knew who I was. Not just a corporate executive, not just a mother, but a woman who had built something meaningful through patience, intelligence, and foresight. I was ready to show my son not just my wealth, but my worth. At precisely 7 o'clock, the concierge called to announce my visitors had arrived. I asked him to send them up and took a final glance around my new home. Everything was perfect. The table elegantly set, delicious aromas wafting from the kitchen, where the chef was putting finishing touches on our dinner soft jazz, playing through the hidden speaker system. I wore a simple but expensive black dress, a far cry from my usual practical attire, and pearl earrings that had belonged to my mother. Not showy, but undeniably elegant. The doorbell rang. I took a deep breath and opened the door. Travis and Stephanie stood there, both impeccably dressed as always. Their expressions, however, were anything but composed. Travis's eyes widened as he took in the expansive entryway with its marble floor and designer lighting. Stephanie's gaze darted around, clearly trying to reconcile what she was seeing with her understanding of my circumstances. "Mom," Travis managed, sounding like a confused child. "What is this place?" "This is my new home," I replied calmly. "Please come in." They followed me into the living room, their bewilderment growing with each step. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city glittered below us, a panoramic view that typically sold for millions. "Can I offer you something to drink?" I asked, moving to the bar cart. "I have an excellent Barolo breathing or cocktails if you prefer." "Mom," Travis said again, his voice strained. "I don't understand. How can you afford this? Are you renting? Is this some kind of short-term arrangement?" I handed them each a glass of wine. "No, I purchased it outright. Please sit down. We have a lot to discuss." They perched on the edge of the sofa, looking like visitors at a museum afraid to touch the exhibits. I sat across from them in a leather armchair and took a sip of my wine. "I owe you an explanation," I began. "You're right that I lost my job at Meridian after 32 years. What you don't know is that losing that job merely changed my professional status, not my financial situation." I explained in measured tones how I had been investing consistently since my 20s, how I had lived below my means, not out of necessity, but by choice, how the frugality they had mocked was a deliberate decision, not a limitation. Currently, my net worth is approximately $4.2 million. I concluded, watching their expressions shift from confusion to shock. I could have retired years ago if I'd wanted to. I continued working because I found purpose in it, not because I needed the income. Stephanie was the first to recover. "But you never said anything. You drove that old car, lived in that ordinary apartment." "I value substance over appearance," I replied simply. "Always have. The things that matter most to me can't be bought: integrity, independence, genuine relationships." Travis had gone pale. "Why didn't you tell me?" His tone held accusation rather than contrition. "Would it have changed how you treated me?" I asked quietly. He had no answer for that. "When I came to you with news of my job loss, you immediately assumed I was financially desperate. You offered me your pool house with conditions attached. You sent me listings for affordable apartments as if I were a charity case. The hurt I'd suppressed surfaced in my voice despite my best efforts. You never once asked how I felt about losing a career that had defined 3 decades of my life." Travis stared at his wine glass. "I was trying to be practical," he muttered. "No, you were being judgmental," I corrected. "You equated my worth with my income, my job title, my possessions." Stephanie shifted uncomfortably. "To be fair, Marguerite, you never corrected our assumptions." "Should I have needed to?" I asked. "Should my own son's respect have been contingent on my bank balance?" Before either could respond, the chef appeared to announce dinner was ready. The timing couldn't have been better. We all needed a moment to regroup. The dining room, with its view of the Charles River and custom lighting, elicited another round of stunned expressions. We sat at the table while the chef served the first course, a delicate scallop crudo that would have been at home in any fine dining establishment. As we ate, an awkward silence stretched between us. Finally, Travis spoke. "So, All those years when I was growing up, when you said we couldn't afford things, we could have afforded them, I confirmed. I chose not to spend money on things I didn't consider important, like my request for Nike shoes in 6th grade. There was a childish petulance in his tone that surprised me. Travis, I bought you perfectly good shoes. They just weren't the brand name everyone else had. I was trying to teach you values beyond materialism. Clearly that lesson didn't take, Stephanie muttered, then looked startled at her own candor. Travis shot her an annoyed glance before turning back to me. There's something else, isn't there? You didn't invite us here just to show off your secret wealth. I set down my fork. Actually, there is something else you should know. I recently made an investment that might interest you professionally. His expression turned wary. What kind of investment? I purchased a building, the Henderson property on Commonwealth Avenue. The color drained from his face. That's impossible. The Henderson has been under negotiation for months. My firm has the inside track. Had the inside track, I corrected gently. The sale closed yesterday. Second Chances Properties is now the official owner. Second Chances, that's your company. His voice rose in disbelief. Mom, do you have any idea what you've done? That building was going to be my breakthrough project. I've spent months cultivating the owner-developing plans. Plans that involved gutting most of the original architecture, I noted. Mr. Patterson mentioned your vision for modern luxury condos that would require removing much of what makes the building special. Travis stood abruptly, his napkin falling to the floor. This is unbelievable. You deliberately sabotaged me. No, Travis, I made a business decision based on my values, the same values I tried to instill in you. That building deserves preservation, not demolition for quick profit. Stephanie placed a hand on Travis's arm. Maybe we should hear your mother out. He shrugged her off, but sat back down, jaw clenched. I didn't buy the Henderson to hurt you, I continued. I bought it because I believe in its potential in history, and because it represented an opportunity to show you something important. What's that? He asked bitterly. That appearances are deceiving. That true wealth isn't about showing off or status symbols. It's about having the freedom to make choices aligned with your values. I paused, making sure I had his full attention. And most importantly, that how you treat people when you think they have nothing to offer you reveals your true character. The words hung in the air between us. Travis stared at his plate shoulders, rigid. Stephanie looked from him to me, her expression unreadable. After a long moment, Travis stood again. I think we should go. I nodded, unsurprised. I understand. This is a lot to process. The door is always open when you're ready to talk. They left, without finishing dinner, Travis striding ahead, while Stephanie lingered to offer an awkward thank you for the meal. As the door closed behind them, I felt a mixture of sadness and relief. The confrontation had been necessary, but painful. I hadn't expected an immediate transformation in Travis's attitude. Years of materialistic values wouldn't disappear in one evening. But I had planted a seed, and that was enough for now. In the months that followed, I settled into a new rhythm of life. Without corporate deadlines structuring my days, I discovered a freedom I hadn't experienced since college. I volunteered at a women's financial literacy program, sharing knowledge I'd acquired over decades. I took cooking classes, joined a hiking group, and reconnected with old friends who had more time for leisurely lunches than I'd ever allowed myself. My relationship with Travis entered a strange limbo. He didn't call for 3 weeks after our dinner. When he finally did reach out, it was ostensibly about the Henderson building. Would you consider selling your interest? He asked, without preamble, when I answered the phone. My firm is prepared to make a competitive offer. I'm not interested in selling Travis, I replied calmly. But I would be open to discussing a partnership that preserves the building's historical elements while allowing for appropriate modernization. His silence spoke volumes. This wasn't just about business. It was about his struggle to accept the new reality of our relationship. I'll think about it, he finally said. 2 days later, he called again with a proposal that involved maintaining the facade and certain interior features while converting other spaces to high-end retail and residential units. It was actually quite thoughtful, showing consideration for the building's heritage. We met several times over the following weeks to discuss the project, our conversations carefully restricted to business matters. Travis brought architectural renderings, market analyses, potential tenant profiles. I contributed ideas about historical preservation, community integration, sustainable practices. Gradually, something unexpected emerged: mutual professional respect. Dorothy observed the shift during one of our regular coffee meetings. You've got him approaching you as an equal now. That's progress. Professional respect is easier than personal reckoning, I noted. He still hasn't addressed how he treated me. Give him time, Dorothy advised. Men have fragile egos, and sons of successful mothers have the most fragile egos of all. Meanwhile, Stephanie began reaching out independently, inviting me to lunch or coffee with increasing frequency. Her attitude had undergone a remarkable transformation, from barely disguised condescension to almost excessive deference. I've always admired your independence, she claimed during one such lunch, rewriting history with breathtaking confidence. The way you built your career without compromising your values. I accepted these overtures with outward grace while maintaining healthy skepticism about their sincerity. Was she genuinely reassessing her values, or simply ensuring access to a newly discovered wealthy relative? Time would tell. 4 months after our confrontational dinner, Travis asked if he could stop by my condo to discuss something important. He arrived looking uncharacteristically nervous, his typically perfect appearance slightly rumpled. I've been doing a lot of thinking, he began, after declining my offer of coffee, about how I reacted when you lost your job, about the things I said and the assumptions I made. I waited, giving him space to continue. I was wrong. He admitted, the words clearly difficult for him. Not just about your financial situation, but about what really matters. I judged your worth by your title and income. I offered help in a way that was demeaning. Yes, you did. I agreed, not making it easier for him. This acknowledgement needed to come from him fully. He winced, but continued. Growing up, I always felt different from my friends. They had newer things, bigger houses, family vacations, to exotic places. I resented our modest lifestyle. Not understanding it was a choice rather than a limitation. I remember trying to explain the difference between needs and wants, I said. You were more interested in keeping up with your classmates. I was a kid, he said defensively, then caught himself. Sorry, that's not an excuse. The point is, I carried that materialism into adulthood. I measured success by possessions and status. When I thought you had lost everything I saw you as, he struggled for words. As a failure, I finished for him. Someone to pity rather than respect. He nodded, eyes downcast. I'm ashamed of that now. The admission hung between us, imperfect but sincere. I considered my response carefully. This was a crucial moment in our relationship. I could either nurture this fragile new awareness or shut it down with lingering resentment. Thank you for acknowledging that, I said finally. It hurt deeply at the time. I know, and I'm sorry. He hesitated. I've been talking to a therapist about all this, about my values and why I became so focused on money and status. It's been eye-opening. This surprised me. Travis had always dismissed therapy as paying someone to listen to your problems. What made you decide to try therapy? I asked. Stephanie actually, he admitted with a small smile. She said she didn't want to raise children with someone who valued bank accounts over people. Said she'd seen how I treated you and wondered how I might treat her if our circumstances changed. That's quite insightful of her, I remarked, reassessing Stephanie's character. She's smarter than I gave her credit for. Travis agreed. And speaking of children, he paused, his expression softening. We're expecting, due in August. The news hit me with unexpected force. I was going to be a grandmother. Despite everything that had happened, life was moving forward, creating new connections, new possibilities for redemption. Congratulations, I said, genuinely pleased. That's wonderful news. We want our child to have different values than the ones I've been pursuing, Travis continued, to understand that worth isn't measured by possessions. I think I need to relearn those lessons myself first. It's never too late to realign with your true values, I told him, and I'm here to help if you want. He nodded, then asked hesitantly, The Henderson Project, were you serious about us working on it together, as actual partners? I was, I confirmed. Your design ideas show real potential, especially now that you're considering preservation alongside profit. I'd like that, he said, then added with a self-deprecating smile. I could learn a lot from someone who built a multi-million-dollar portfolio while everyone underestimated her. We talked for hours that afternoon, beginning to rebuild a relationship on more solid ground. There was still work to do, trust to be reestablished. But it was a start. As spring turned to summer, our personal and professional relationships continued to evolve. The Henderson Project moved forward, with Travis gaining respect in the industry for its innovative approach to historical preservation. I expanded my volunteer work to include mentoring women entrepreneurs, finding deep satisfaction in sharing knowledge accumulated over decades. I also began exploring philanthropy more seriously, establishing a foundation focused on financial education for single parents. The irony wasn't lost on me. The money I had quietly accumulated would now be used to help others achieve the independence I had always valued. One evening in July, Travis and Stephanie invited me to dinner at their home. Unlike the disastrous meal months earlier, this evening had a different energy. Travis had done the cooking himself, simple comfort food, rather than Stephanie's elaborate cuisine. Their home seemed warmer somehow, with family photos replacing some of the more ostentatious decorative pieces. After dinner, Travis handed me a small box. We wanted you to have this. Inside was a key and an envelope. The envelope contained documents for a trust they had established for their unborn child's education. We want you to be trustee, Stephanie explained, to make sure these funds are used to support education and growth, not status or appearances. And the key, Travis added, is to our guest house, not the pool house, he clarified quickly. The actual guest house we're converting from the old garden shed. It won't be fancy, but it will be yours whenever you want it. No conditions, no expectations. The symbolism wasn't subtle, but it was sincere. They were offering me a place in their lives on my terms, acknowledging my independence while creating space for connection. Thank you, I said simply. I'd be honored. As I drove home that night, I reflected on the journey of the past year. Losing my job had been painful, but it had forced a necessary reckoning. Without that corporate identity, I had discovered who I truly was, not Marguerite the executive, but simply Marguerite. A woman with values, resources, and the wisdom to use both effectively. My son was beginning his own journey toward similar self-knowledge. It wouldn't be a straight path. Genuine change never is. But he was making progress. And in August, a new generation would begin, hopefully, with a clearer understanding of what truly constitutes wealth. Sometimes we need to lose what we think defines us to discover what actually matters. Sometimes we need others to see us at our most vulnerable to understand who truly values us. And sometimes, just sometimes, what appears to be our greatest loss becomes the catalyst for our most meaningful transformation. Have you ever had a family member judge you based on your financial situation rather than your character? How did you handle it? Please share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real-life stories about family relationships and life lessons. Thank you for listening, and remember, your worth is never defined by your bank account or job title, but by the integrity with which you live your life.